So we're going to shift gears a little bit, actually quite a bit, and move into anxiety and depression. This just because we've already hit a downer, with some of the vocational outcomes right now. But this I think is a real important subject area as well. So we can jump into this, and I'm interested in what you guys have experienced with this. Here's kind of what we know at this point, that there's a growing body of research in spina bifida with increased recognition of anxiety and depression among young adults with the condition. This is not uncommon in any population of individuals with a medical condition. So this is the case with asthma, this is the case with cerebral palsy, this is cystic fibrosis. There's a higher incidence of anxiety and depression. We know that there is a higher incidence of depression, particularly in women with spina bifida and women with pain, right? And so that's the highest level of risk associated with spina bifida is if you're female and if you're in a good bit of pain. But everyone's at some risk for that. So we should, if you were designing some sort of adult program for spina bifida, there should be just some screenings for that because it's really common. When I talk to individuals in our clinic, sometimes I will say that, and it represents a degree of relief, oddly enough, because people have been experiencing this and didn't know that it was really all that common or thought they were the only one with that. But in fact, there's pretty high incidence of that. And the closer we kind of move the research down into adolescence and childhood, we can identify some of that as well. I think there's some reasons for that. We were just talking about all the medical disruptions that spina bifida can pose to your life. So, it interrupts things. It can restrict you from social activities. It can restrict you from a lot of things, and it's a real challenge to figure out a way to get around a lot of the barriers. But it's not that uncommon. The other thing that's becoming clear is that stress, trauma, the stress associated with spina bifida and some of the trauma associated with it is getting more attention now, and we should probably be paying more attention to that as well. And I'll show you what I mean in a few minutes here. First of all, I want to talk about this idea of pediatric medical traumatic stress that some of you may have be coming out the other side of, okay? So many ill or injured children and their families, up to about 80%, experience some traumatic stress reactions following a life-threatening illness, injury, or painful medical procedure. And it's been reported that between 20 to 30% of parents and 15 to 25% of children and siblings experience persistent traumatic stress reactions that impair daily functioning. So will you just raise your hand if you've heard of PTSD? Has anybody heard of that term? Okay. So PTSD, we usually associate with like soldiers that have been overseas and have been in battle and have had some, a lot of stress and traumatic experiences and come home and then still have like nightmares or, still re-experience the trauma. We're starting to see that individuals that have been through a lot of medical stress also have some of the same responses and have the same kind of anxious responses. I want to be really careful. I don't want anybody disclosing anything they don't want to disclose. But it is apparently a pretty common experience to have an elevated stress level when you have hydrocephalus and spina bifida, because things could go wrong, and they could go wrong the very next day. Can I at least get an amen on that? Okay. So I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here on this one. But this is Ann Kazak, who's she's at DuPont or the Nemours. You have a Nemours here, don't you? So she's the one in Delaware. But she's kind of pioneered this idea, and this is with cancer patients or people that have had cancer in childhood and and then grow into adults, right? But I'm not going to go into all of this, but the model is that if you've had a life-threatening illness, your functioning can be impacted by that experience. Makes sense, right? And what's important is the perception of a life threat. And that may be unrelated to the actual diagnosis or the objective diagnosis. So let me explain that. So if somebody has, let's say, an episode of hydrocephalus or shunt failure, or gets really sick and has to go into the hospital, and they feel like they're going to die or that they're at risk of dying, that can result in long-term stress reactions, even if the doctors and the nurses don't see it as such a major threat. Does that make sense? So like doctors and nurses and all of us in the medical profession, we get really used to this stuff, and so we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna do brain surgery on you, and then we're open you up, and then we're gonna put this straw in there, and then we're gonna take and we get really used to that. But that's really, I'm not going to curse because I'm on tape, but that's really effing scary, isn't it? To go through. Maybe you get used to it. Maybe you just kind of get numb to it. But I suspect, that's just a stress response because it's pretty scary. But it's scary for parents and siblings. You probably had parents that were freaking out, or you had brothers and sisters maybe that were freaking out. And, most people cope pretty well. But it can have this long, ongoing stress response that occurs after, and it just kind of shapes you. So, and it happens at different points. So phase one is at the time of the traumatic event. So maybe your shunt fails, or maybe, your parents, when they found out you had to have major surgery day one of life, that was scary for them. But, there are things that happen at the time of the medical trauma, right? And you may even have some traumatic stress after it's done. Okay, I got my surgery, and then you're in the hospital, and it's like, boy, I'm still kind of stressed out. So here's some things. This is what parents have said to me, and I collected some of these responses from a question on Facebook. But this is scary. My daughter is 4 and has already had 9 revisions. Good Lord. My son had 3 surgery and he's 19 months old. I'm 36 and I've had brain surgery 16 times. That's crazy, you guys. Maybe some of you have more than that. We've spent 8 weeks in the hospital with my son in the past 18 months, and I wish we never had to go to the hospital again. I think some of you might not want to go to the hospital again, it sounds like. I got violently ill the last time my shunt malfunctioned, and I vomited nonstop. It's it's the person with the condition, but also then the parent. Seeing your kid go through that is just devastating. I had 3 malfunctions in my 31 years, and all 3 times my mom was worried that I might die. It's just a ton of stress to throw onto somebody and to throw onto a family. All right? And that happens at the time of the event. But what also happens is this long-term traumatic response. So, the risk that this may happen again, right? And the fear of that, and how do you cope with that for everybody? And so I'm believing there's a lot of long-term stress well after the hydrocephalus has been treated, or whatever medical condition was the original stress precipitant, right? And these are examples of long-term stress responses the parents have told me, or the patients have told me. I always wonder if my next revision will be the one where things start going wrong. Like maybe it won't turn out the way that I wanted it to, or that it was supposed to. Or that a parent, I'm worried that the shunt malfunction will result in a personality change. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? And this is really scary. My niece was just fine 1 minute, but the next minute anything can happen. It's that long. I'm not trying to bum anybody out here, okay? Am I bumming people out? Is this? But you know, it's life, right? So, parents, I still get anxious every time my son has a headache. His last revision was 8 years ago, but he had a brain infection at that time. So the idea that I can't even really get a headache without, you know, having to wonder, is this something bigger than a headache? And then this teenager told me, everyone thinks I'm faking and the school yells at me for school absences. So, you know, not taking these medical concerns seriously or saying that you're making them up, right? The constant guessing game, never really knowing when something is wrong. This person had 8 revisions and their symptoms were so subtle, it wasn't clear if it was really a shunt, you know, failure or not. This parent told me that one of the worst things in the world is getting a call from the school. I don't know if anybody's had that experience or if you've had that experience, but the idea that, uh-oh, something's wrong and our life could be entirely different, you know, tomorrow. We might be in the hospital, I might be getting surgery. And parents have told me they just celebrate when their kids with spina bifida only have a virus or a stomach bug. I don't know, does that sound familiar? Anybody? No? All right. That's what they tell me. They're like, oh my God, it's such a relief that they have diarrhea. Because if they have diarrhea, if they have diarrhea, that means that it's probably not the shunt. So, being scared to travel, you know, I don't know if you guys ride planes or not, but you know, that can be kind of scary. Or even just being too far from the neurologist or neurosurgeon. I've been told that that can be kind of traumatic as well. So, I've got some, you know, this is some stuff if you're interested. I was going to say, give this to your spina bifida providers. You'd be a little more aware of this. Like, let me ask you, when you go to the hospital, do people treat you like this is a real dangerous, scary thing, or is it kind of routine for them? What's that?
It's not routine at all.
The providers,
yeah. None of them dedicated to spina bifida per se, so I mean.
So they're pretty cool and they're like really okay. Any, pardon?
They don't seem to know enough. Like
know enough, yeah.
They
They
don't
know
seem to
more.
know. It's like you're educating them a lot.
Yeah, a lot of times.
And a lot of times you're educating in the hospital.
Oh.
You're
It's
trying
not as it's rare. I guess it's more rare than.
It seems more now.
It's more rare that someone actually even knows anything about. Okay. Does that build your confidence when you're going in for surgery or for?
Well, you're
Not at
educating.
all. Not at all.
Okay, not at all.
Because they don't know. You can get sicker, like things that might be something simple, or they see you walk in and they think, "Oh, you're walking just fine," and they're like,
Oh, so
"Look at my
sometimes
file," and then oh.
you're having to convince them that
Yeah.
something's wrong.
Yeah, like they'll come in and say, "Oh, you're just being like, can you wave my, oh, okay, you know."
Okay.
You sound scary.
You gotta be what's that word in the conference? Self-advocate. You have to be your own self-advocate. And just kind of speak up for what you need because they might not put it right on right away.
Wow.
You know your body, so I mean, you know something's wrong.
So, I mean, when you talk about having to self-advocate, I mean, something's going wrong anyway. Isn't it an extra, like, that's a lot to expect of the patient, right?
But it is, because they don't know, like sometimes it could be like an infection, a liver infection or something, kidney, and they hear people like, oh, you're like, no, this and this, and then they're like, oh, okay, I feel like it could be life or death, you know, if you a little bit easily, you know, I've been in the hospital that's happened, and they think, oh, people interchange or bladder and kidney infection, so you really have been in there where you're like really sick, and this might just be a fluke. Like last time they almost took home, and she's like, oh, your blood pressure low, and I'm like, I should have been on top of that more. I'm telling them, and then you get blood. You know, you get your death, and like, oh yeah. Afterwards, like,
Just
a very lack of awareness, I think.
okay. Just for the video, there's an example of you know, really having to educate the medical providers and take the symptoms seriously, and really because they could mess up your aftercare or could make things worse if they don't respond appropriately. Well, so I was going to say you should take this to your spina bifida providers, but if you don't have any, you know, you still can. I guess, it's really the emotional piece afterwards, though. Let me. So the idea of this is that it can actually turn into something like a stress response. If you don't mind sharing, do any of you just have a stress response being back at the hospital? Does that, or even if you're not sick, is the hospital associated with something that makes you just anxious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
I had 3 different kinds of surgeries, and it brought back bad memories every time I tried to go. Like, I need to go to the hospital. I was like, I just couldn't do it. I was just so afraid that something's gonna be wrong. And I couldn't do it.
Couldn't go back to the hospital?
I could not.
Don't. So just going back makes you think it's
Yeah.
in a
Yeah,
thought.
something's wrong.
Yeah. Does anybody have nightmares? Oh, that's nice. Okay, good. Does anybody have parents that get freaked out about this, or spouses, or friends that freak out about this? Okay, you guys seem like you're coping really well. Kinda is.
I had an incident not too long ago where I had an ultrasound. I'll share it with you guys. I thought it left me right there with that PTSD. My brother is a veteran. And
Uh-huh.
it was like, sounds like PTSD because I had a close call. They injected me with the X-ray, what is that, iodine? And I had a really bad reaction to that iodine. It closed up my stuff and I couldn't breathe.
Uh-huh.
I felt myself like I was gone. But after that, I couldn't get right. It was like it took me a while. And I was anxious, and my heart would race, and I would get like sweaty palms, and I was like, "What's going on with me?" Because
Uh-huh.
I'm freaking out now for no reason. And my brother's like, "Maybe it's something that left you with that feeling, like I couldn't breathe."
Uh-huh.
And it took a while for me to get through it, but I got through it.
Mhm.
But it's like it left me stressed, like really stressed.
Wow. Thank you. Did you have a similar experience? Or what were you saying?
Well, like when I go to the hospital, like I haven't been in the hospital in like 17 years, but when I go there, it's like it makes me reflect on my childhood and all the surgeries I had then.
Mhm.
I had like 12 surgeries before I was like 8 years old.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so it brings some of the memories back when you go in the
I
hospital.
remember the gas mask.
The mass, so there's a specific memory that comes right back to you when you go in that hospital. Okay. Well, here's some examples of how some people have coped or what they do to cope with this. And we all, it's just the human condition that we have to cope with stress. Some of the people I've talked to really find music to be useful for coping. Some people find journaling to be useful. And some people find prayer and meditation to be helpful. But I'm interested, do you guys have ideas? What's a good way of coping with this? Because it sounds like it comes up once in a while at least, or there's a lot of anxiety around the medical event. Have you found something that really does help you cope with this or manage the anxiety around it? Or is everybody just stressed out?
Art helps me a lot.
What's that?
Art, music, writing, all that stuff.
Art and music and writing help?
Creativity is kind of
Mhm.
Coloring.
coloring.
So what do? You color?
Color, listen to music, or read.
Color, listen to music, and read? Great.
That helps me a lot.
I try I do a Google search of the issue. I just try to get a better understanding, and that gives me more at ease.
So to actually ease your anxiety, you just want to educate yourself more about it. Even if that information's scary, at least you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So knowledge helps settle the anxiety down. Anybody else have ideas? Exercise? Anybody exercise to settle? Yeah, you exercise?
Yeah, I go to the skate park a lot. I'm WC Max athlete, so I do like tricks, and I do that a lot, about 3 or 4 times a week.
That's great.
Exercising has been I think a really good antidepressant for me.
Uh-huh.
And just getting out, even like just going to the store, just being around people.
So being active, getting out, exercising, being around people.
Yeah.
Great. Those are kind of really normal, healthy ways of, nobody said medication. I don't know if anybody's used medication as well, but the things you're describing are really good, healthy lifestyle kinds of things to manage the stress, so it's great. So experiment with it. See if you can find other things that really help with that. Have you guys been watching the Paralympics, by the way? Oh my God, it's fantastic, isn't it? No, you're not watching it? You got to watch this. Oh my gosh, I just watched the wheelchair basketball game last
They
night. It
always
was
score
really.
doubles when the other team scores.
What's that?
They always score twice with the other
Oh, the women's team is really good. I was watching the women's wheelchair game, but it was fantastic.